Hello everyone, I'm sorry for the last technical glitch, so we had to discontinue that video. So we have already covered the summary of Code of Ethics as per 2020 Code of Ethics 2020 ka summary we have covered, and along with that we have also covered the threats, we have covered the fundamental principles. Now the new thing which has been recently added, that is your May 2022 examination amendment that is newly added in your code of ethics is the NOCLAR. Sir, what do you mean by NOCLAR? Non-compliance of laws and regulations. The full form of NOCLAR is non-compliance with laws and regulations. Sir, can you please throw some more light on NOCLAR? Yes, I would love to. And remember one thing, being an amendment, so it is highly expected in your examination. Are you getting the point? Highly expected in your examination. So, sir, non-compliance with laws and regulations means what? Actually, what used to happen is earlier the auditor had to fight between his two fundamental principles. One fundamental principle which the auditor always have to maintain, you all know, is known as confidentiality. What is the first fundamental principle? Confidentiality. Now, what do you mean by confidentiality? Sometimes you know that you will come across some confidential and sensitive information of your client which may directly impact the financial statements of the client, but as an auditor of that particular client you are expected to maintain what? Confidentiality. So at one side you have to maintain the confidentiality, but on the other side your ethics says that you should report. On the other side your ethics says that you should report to the higher authorities. So on one side you have to maintain the confidentiality, and on the other side your ethical principles, the ethical requirements says that please report if you find any non-compliance. Because if you remember, we have done essay 250. Sir, what is essay 250? Consideration of laws and regulations. Now, as per essay 250, as and when you see any kind of non-compliance of laws and regulations which are directly impacting the financial statements of the client, then in that case, what is your responsibility? You have to modify your report. You have to modify your report and you have to communicate to the higher authorities. But if you want to communicate to the higher authorities, the another ethical principle which comes in your way, that is called confidentiality. So what to do, what not to do? This was the biggest ethical dilemmatic situation for chartered accountants in practice and professional accountants in practice. Now the ICAI, now the Institute of Chartered Accountant of India, by following the footsteps of IESAB, International Ethical Standard Board. Are you getting the point? It is on the footsteps of that international board, and now they have also brought NOCLAR in India. Actually, NOCLAR is a very old concept. It's a very old concept. International Ethical Standard Board already included NOCLAR for so many years back, but Institute of Chartered Accountant of India has brought this concept of NOCLAR. Now, what is basically NOCLAR? NOCLAR ka full form, non-compliance of laws and regulations. Now, sir, why we are doing this? If you find any kind of non-compliance of laws and regulations, whether done intentionally or unintentionally by the employee, officer, management, TCWG, anyone in the organization, then it is your responsibility that you have to report it to the regulatory authorities. Are you getting the point? The dilemma which the auditor was already into earlier, should I report or I should not report? If I'll report, confidentiality is coming, but if I'll not report, my ethics are not allowing me to keep my mouth shut. So that kind of dilemmatic situation has been, resolved by introduction of NOCLAR. So what do you mean by NOCLAR, everyone? You can see that in the course of providing the professional services to the client or carrying out the professional activities for an employer, professional accountants may come across an instance of non-compliance with the laws and regulations. So when you are providing the professional services to your client, either you are a professional accountant in practice or you are a professional accountant in service. So remember, this NOCLAR provision is also applicable on both of them. Either you are a practicing CA or you are a servicing CA while doing the activities, professional activities for your client or for your employer. It is specially written for your client and for your employer. Where it is written? It is written when you are providing professional services to your client or you are doing the professional activities for your what? For your employer. It means both are covered here. Who are covered here? Professional accountants in service are also covered, and professional accountants in practice are also covered. While doing the practice, while serving your client, and while serving your employer, if you come across any kind of non-compliance of the laws and regulation, or suspected non-compliance of laws and regulation committed by the whom? Committed by whom? By your client or the employer, or by the TCWG, or by the management, or by the employees of the client, or by the employer. So either your client has done the NOCLAR, or the employer has done the NOCLAR, or TCWG has done the NOCLAR, or management has done the NOCLAR, or employees have done the NOCLAR. It is your responsibility to report it. Now the question arises, sir, do we have to report only intentional NOCLAR? Answer is no. It can be intentional or it can be unintentional. It can be an omission or it can be a commission. Suppose your client omitted to follow the law and regulation or committed a wrongful thing in following the laws and regulations. It can be intentional NOCLAR or it can be unintentional NOCLAR, done by your employer or done by your client, done by the TCWG or done by the management. Your responsibility is to report it. Are you getting the point? Now, who can do it? Your client can do it, your employer can do it, TCWG can do it, management can do it, or other individuals working in the company can do it. So I hope you all understood the concept of NOCLAR. So NOCLAR stands for non-compliance of laws and regulations. It is applicable for both professional accountants in service as well as the professional accountants in practice. So in case while doing the practice and while doing the service, if you come across any kind of NOCLAR or suspected NOCLAR done by the client or employer intentionally or unintentionally in the form of omission or commission, then in that case your responsibility is to report. Now, next, how a NOCLAR under revised code of ethics does not address the personal misconduct unrelated to the business. Remember one thing, NOCLAR mein what is excluded? What is excluded? If any MD, CEO or CFO has done any personal non-compliance, if it is a personal NOCLAR of any CEO, MD or CFO, that is not required to be reported here. We are only going to report those kind of intentional or unintentional NOCLARs which are connected with the business of your client or which are connected with the business of your employer. Personal NOCLARs are not covered in the code of ethics, not at all covered. So personal non-compliance of laws and regulations are not covered. Suppose one of the CFO has not paid the taxes. So that is his personal NOCLAR. That is not the business related NOCLAR. Are you getting the point or not? Next, as per IESBA, as I already told you, International Ethical Standard Board of Accountants. So it is International Ethical Standard Board of Accountants. Following examples would be covered in the NOCLAR. Now, we are going to report which kind of NOCLARs that we are going to understand. So what kind of NOCLARs are going to be reported here? We are going to report NOCLARs relating to fraud, corruption or bribery. We are going to report NOCLARs relating to money laundering, terrorist financing and proceeds of crime. We are going to report NOCLAR relating to securities marketing and trading like insider trading or something like that. Banking and other financial products and services NOCLAR. We are also going to report if there is any data malfunctioning, data mining or data kind of any NOCLAR relating to data protection also. We are also going to report those NOCLARs which are relating to environmental protection. Like say for example, Air Pollution Act is applicable to you, but you are not having the proper welfare measures and safety measures and health measures for your for your workers in the factory. NOCLAR relating to public health and safety. Suppose you are doing any kind of business which is bringing danger to the public health and safety, and you are also going to report those NOCLARs relating to tax and pension liabilities and payments. Suppose if there is any default in workmen compensation fund. So these are the various examples of the NOCLAR which you have to report. Either done intentionally or unintentionally, done by your client or employer in the form of commission or in the form of omission. Always remember. Now, what is the objective of NOCLAR? Objective of the NOCLAR is that auditor should not turn a blind eye If the auditor will keep his eyes closed, how the people, how the stakeholders will have a belief on the auditor then? If the professional accountant in service, people expect a quality work from a chartered accountant. You are not expected to shut your eyes down. If in front of you any kind of NOCLAR is going on, non-compliance of law and regulation is going on, you are expected to open up your eyes and you are expected to report it. Are you getting the point or not? So that is what they are saying. The objective of NOCLAR is that turning a blind eye to the potential NOCLAR is not an appropriate response from the professional accountants, while placing the renewed emphasis on the roles of management and TCWG in addressing the matter. Further, it increases the awareness and understanding among the professional accountants of their legal and regulatory responsibilities when they face NOCLAR. Some important points about the NOCLAR. What is the first one? During the course of providing a service. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? Remember one thing, you are not expected to investigate the NOCLAR. You are only expected to report the NOCLAR. Moment you will come to know about that there is a non-compliance or suspected NOCLAR, then in that case your duty is done. You are not required to investigate. Investigation is not your responsibility. And you are not responsible for its complete compliance. That is the responsibility of the management. Your responsibility is to only report it. And next most important point, expertise of laws not required. You are not expected to behave like an expert at that point of time. If you think that to understand a particular NOCLAR, you need a legal advice or you need an expert advice, hire the expert and then try to understand it. Professional accountants are only expected to apply a normal knowledge and normal expertise. We are not expected to have a high level of expertise. In case high level of expertise is required, it is better to hire someone to do the same. Now see, professional accountant is expected to apply knowledge and expertise and exercise professional judgment. However, is not expected to have a level of knowledge of laws and regulations greater than which is required to undertake the engagement. Whether an act constitutes non-compliant is ultimately a matter to be determined by the court or other appropriate adjudicative body. So what are the so many points we understood? So NOCLAR stands for non-compliance of laws and regulations applicable to professional accountants in service and professional accountants in practice. Next one. What is NOCLAR? If there is any NOCLAR or suspected NOCLAR found out by a practicing CA or a servicing CA while serving to his client or employer, either done intentionally or unintentionally by the client or TCWG or employer or management, either in the form of commission or omission, it is your responsibility to report it to the regulatory authority. What kind of NOCLAR you are not expected to report? The personal NOCLARs are not required to be reported. And those kind of NOCLARs which are not at all having any consequential, which are clearly non-consequential in nature, and which are clearly personal NOCLAR in nature, you are not expected to report on that. Sir, what kind of NOCLARs you will be reporting? NOCLARs relating to insider trading, relating to SEBI, data protection, environmental protection, public health and safety, NOCLAR relating to, what do you say, you can see all these examples, money laundering, tax, pension, evasion, all these kinds of NOCLARs you have to report. And you are not expected to investigate a NOCLAR. You are only and only expected to just catch the NOCLAR and report it. You are not expected to investigate or not expected to have the compliance of that. Right or not? That is different thing. Then what are the certain matters which are expressly out of the purview? Those NOCLARs which are clearly inconsequential in nature and which are personal in nature. Are you getting the point? And as per IESBA code, what is IESBA code? International Ethical Standard Board of Accountants code. Disclosure of the matters to an appropriate authority would be precluded if doing so would be contrary to the law or regulation. If you think that if it is against the law and regulation, then in that case you are not expected to disclose it to regulatory authority. Now the major difference between NOCLAR, sir, that too we have read in essay 250 also. Now what is the major difference between NOCLAR and essay 250? The major difference between the NOCLAR and essay 250 is NOCLAR is a broader concept. Essay 250 was only and only connected with the auditing engagements. NOCLAR is having a wider scope. It is connected with the auditing, review and assurance engagement. Essay 250 was only and only limited to whom? it was only and only limited to members in practice. But NOCLAR is covering both members in practice as well as the members in service. So that is a point number 1. Point number 2 में NOCLAR में stakeholders has been described. What do you mean by stakeholders? Everyone, your competitors, your lenders, government, management, shareholders, everyone is a stakeholder. So NOCLAR is basically is introduced to protect the interest of whom? Stakeholders. But SA 250 was basically not at all specifically, it was talking about what? Stakeholders. So yes, stakeholders have been introduced in the NOCLAR, but stakeholder definition was not there in SA 250. Are you getting the point or not? So SA 250 does not define the stakeholder. NOCLAR is related to affect on non-compliance on investor, creditors, employees, and general public. Next one. As per the NOCLAR, in exceptional circumstances, professional accountant might become aware of an imminent breach of law and regulation that would cause substantial harm to investor, creditor, employee, or the general public. Having first considered whether it would be appropriate to discuss the matter with the TCWG or management, the accountant shall exercise professional judgment, determine whether to close the matter to the appropriate authority or not. Right or not? Next one, if the disclosure is made, that disclosure is permitted. This provision is not existing in 250. So there are so many differences between the NOCLAR and SA 250. So these 4 points, when you will read it, you will come to know the major differences between SA 250 and NOCLAR. Now, applicability of NOCLAR in India, as I already told you, IESBA, International Ethical Standard Board of Accountants, they have already introduced the NOCLAR so many years back, but ICAI has introduced it recently, and ICAI has specifically limited the NOCLAR provision only and only to the listed entities. In case of members in practice and for the members in services, applicability has been restricted to employees of the listed entities only, and that too only and only audit assignments. So far, full NOCLAR has not been introduced by ICAI. ICAI kept it only and only restricted to professional accountants in practice and professional accountants in services relating to listed entities. It means if your employer is a listed entity, or you're working in a listed entity, or your client is a listed entity, up to that extent only NOCLAR has been restricted so far by the ICAI code. So it is trying to put forward the footsteps on the IESBA code, but IESBA code makes NOCLAR applicable to all types of assignments in case of members in practice and to all the employees in case of members in service. But in India, only and only applicable to listed entities and listed employees. Did you got the point or not? So I hope every one of you understood everything relating to NOCLAR. So how do you have to respond to NOCLAR in case of employment? Responsibility is of the senior professional accountant in service, and also it is a responsibility on those professional accountants other than the senior professional accountant. In case of audit engagement, it is a responsibility of the professional accountant. What are the steps to be taken for responding? First of all, obtain the understanding of the matter. First of all, try to understand, acquire the knowledge of that NOCLAR. Then addressing the matter, address it. Then seeking the advice. If you think that you are not expert enough to comment upon that, seek the advice. Then determining whether further action is needed or not. See for further action if it is required or not. Determining whether to disclose it to the appropriate authority or not. And see that is it an imminent breach? Is it a big breach? If it is a big breach, and if it is required to be reported, but always you are required to maintain what? Documentation for the NOCLAR. Like we maintain the documentation in SA 250, you also have to maintain the documentation in NOCLAR. So it may be noted that in a situation where the disclosure ought to be made by the auditor, the appropriate authority for the purpose of disclosure will depend upon the nature of the matter. For example, appropriate authority would be SEBI in case of financial fraudulent reporting. So according to different types of NOCLAR, different types of appropriate authority are there. So appropriate alignment has been made in code with regard to requirements of confidentiality as required under Chartered Accountants Act 1949. Did you get the point? So that is what all about the NOCLAR you should have known about. So this is what NOCLAR, non-compliance of laws and regulation, is all about. Very small topic. So why we stressed so much on that? Because it is amendment, and definitely you are going to be tested with the amendment. Maybe it should come. Maybe it may also come in your examination, right? So with this, our provisions relating to new code of ethics, that is a revision relating to summary of code of ethics, is also over. Fundamental principles are also over. threats are over, how to handle those threats are also over, as well as the NOCLAR relating provision is also over. Now we are going to understand the Code of Ethics 1949, which is divided into two schedules, having 4 parts in the schedule 1 and 3 parts in the schedule 2, and having 34 clauses in total, along with some self-regulatory measure guidelines and along with some council measures. So that we are going to start in the next topic, right? So let us start with the next topic. What is the next topic? Chartered Accountants Act 1949.